Encaustic is a very physical kind of paint. You can build up an appreciable thickness in a relatively short time. It's just endlessly unusual the way the paint interacts with what's come before. Today I was working on a rather large encaustic 4 by 4 feet. The subject is a facade of a building which happens to be quite near the gallery on Arch Street. It's arches and geometry, and yet the subject is going to essentially be the flaking and crumbling paint on that surface. I had made drawings of the structure itself, very architectural sorts of drawings. But those drawings, I intentionally did a lot of erasing and adding and subtracting, knowing that the painting would probably develop in a similar fashion. I've got the information secured ahead of time with the drawings and the color studies that I've done. So now it's time to react to that and then see what the paint dictates. There's a lot of interesting stuff that happens there, and to me, no two moments are the same within a painting. Actual making of the painting, there were some underpinnings of very fluid encaustic done with a brush. Once those major lines were secured, then I just took the paint itself, which is hot beeswax, a little bit of Damar crystals, and dry pigment. And I just painted and covered over, got a presence, a body of paint there that I could work onto. The paint itself you apply hot, about 205 to 8 degrees. The white thing over there next to the palette is an air exchanger. It takes in fumes from the encaustic and filters them. And I keep the paint very clean so that I don't get any burning paint. The fumes when it's burning are not good for you. Certainly handling the pigment, you have to use precautions. When you're doing encaustic, don't mix it with turpentine and then heat it, because you're ultimately going to end up with the equivalent of mustard gas. It's extremely toxic. You don't heat turpentine. As you paint, you use whatever tool you can find to get that hot molten colored wax from the palette onto the panel. A birch plywood panel that's reinforced, and it has special gesso ground which can withstand the heat. And when I'm painting, I use the brush or the knife or the spackle blade in one hand, and the other hand I'm using a hot air gun, what they use for house painting to burn off old paint. It needs to get up to a certain temperature in order to make it effective. Now, that hot air gun gives me more of an open working time while I'm painting. The paint will set as soon as it cools. And out of necessity on the large paintings, if I don't have that hot air gun in one hand, I just won't be able to cover any ground with any kind of efficiency. There is that balance between being efficient and being able to react to what you've just done. One of the things about encaustic that I find so enjoyable is that I really don't have to ever stop to wait for anything to dry. As soon as it cools, it sets, and you can continue putting layers of paint on top of paint. It's very much like a building kind of process, and then there's a scraping away and an excavating of the image and the paint, which is also a very rewarding experience. Sometimes when I'm doing these paintings, I'm thinking sort of backwards, and I'll put down things at the beginning that I have an inkling of what might happen with them later. I do a lot of scraping with the razor blade as I put layers of paint on, and then I'll scrape away and reveal different things from underneath. There's certain qualities that you get that way. It's a wonderful way of making texture and interaction of color that I don't think you can quite get any other way. The buildings themselves are rather reddish pink salmon color. To play up that flaking paint, I had noticed that there were some cool colors underneath, even some greens. So I use that for some of my underpaint. And I'll just scrape through to see just what's going to happen, what's underneath, and what it looks like. After each stage, you have to lie the painting horizontally and then pass the heat gun over it to burn in the layer that you've just completed with the layers that have come before. It sort of bonds the layers together. When you do that, you get some wonderful qualities from the heat interacting with the paint itself. Different pigments melt at different temperatures and they act differently. So you get these unexpected blooms of color and mixings that you didn't count on, but that you can react to once they're there. And you have the option of either saving them or obliterating them or somehow making them work for you. And finally, when the painting is all burned in and everything is set and secure and cooled, then you take a soft cotton cloth and you fold it into a pad. You use a circular motion and a fair amount of pressure. You buff the painting up. What happens is the wax becomes more translucent and it buffs up to a beautiful shine. You can see through the layers at that point, and you really get the true beauty of the encaustic, that luminescent quality that comes from underneath. I grew up among a family of builders, folks that worked with their hands. To me, my drawing and painting are very much entwined with that kind of thing, where you're developing a skill, you're working at it, and you're continually reacting to the physical material. So ultimately, I do these paintings just to see how they're going to turn out.